Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 547, Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly, Part 2. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. This book deals with the nature of consciousness. This book was written around 1972. Today's show will feature background footage from Sam's Knob Trail. To get there, take the Blue Ridge Parkway south out of Asheville, North Carolina. Go past Mount Pisgah and past Graveyard Fields. Shortly past the Graveyard Fields overlook is Black Balsam Road, off to the right. Follow that road until the end. Sam's Knob Trail goes off the parking area near the restrooms. I only hiked a portion of the trail. It started to rain. So then I headed back north on the parkway, heading back towards Asheville. Then I hiked at Beaver Dam Gap Overlook. And here I took the Mount Sea Trail south. So, now let's continue with Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. Now, let's go to page 50 and continuing on to page 51 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. During this first trip, I also defined other kinds of belief with which I would experiment. I would try to go to universes other than our consensus universe. Universes I didn't necessarily believe existed, but which I could imagine. At first, this was a test of the hypothesis that one believes to be true becomes true. Before the trip, I didn't believe in these universes or spaces, but I defined them as existing. During the LSD trip in the tank, I then took on these beliefs as true. After the trip, I then disengaged and looked at what happened as a set of experiences, a set of consequences of the belief. For example, I assumed that there were civilizations way beyond ours, that there were entities in our universe that we normally cannot detect, but are there and have realities way beyond ours. Suddenly, I was precipitated into such spaces. I maintained myself as a central point of consciousness, of feeling, of recording. I moved into universes containing beings much larger than myself, so that I was a mote in their sunbeam, a small ant in their universe, a single thought in a huge mind, or a small program in a cosmic computer. The first time I entered these spaces, I was swept, pushed, carried, whirled, and in general beat around by processes which I could not understand. Processes of immense energy, of fantastic light, and of terrifying power. My very being itself was threatened as I was pushed through these vast spaces by these vast entities. Waves of the equivalent of light, of sound, of motion, waves of intense emotion were carried in dimensions beyond my understanding. The first time this happened, I became extremely anxious and jumped back into my body. Now, let's go to page 60 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. I am out beyond our galaxy, beyond galaxies as we know them. Time is apparently speeded up 100 billion times. The whole universe collapses into a point. Then there is a tremendous explosion, and out of the point on one side comes positive matter and positive energies, streaking into the cosmos at fantastic velocities. Out of the opposite side of the point comes antimatter, streaking off into the opposite direction. The universe expands to its maximum extent, recollapses, and expands 3 times. During each expansion, the guides say, man appears here and disappears there. All I could see is a thin slice for man. I asked, where does man go when he disappears until he is ready to reappear again? They say, that is us. During this experience, I was filled with awe, reverence, and a fantastic feeling of smallness, of not amounting to very much. Everything was happening on such a vast scale that I was merely an observer of microscopic size. And yet I was more than this. I was part of some vast network of similar beings, all connected, somehow or other responsible for what was going on. I was given an individuality for temporary purposes only. I would be reabsorbed into the network when the time came. Now, let's go to page 86 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. In recent years, there has been much talk and much regulation both within the National Institutes of Health themselves and in their grants to medical schools. They prohibit the use of human subjects until a jury of one's peers judges whether or not the experiments should be done. This was a restriction placed upon the psychotherapy experiments using LSD at the Spring Grove State Hospital. The protocol of the experiments was exposed to several committees for a decision as to whether or not the group that proposed the experiments would be authorized to do them. I went over the protocols of the proposal from the Spring Grove State Hospital. In no case was it proposed that investigators should be exposed to the experimental procedures first. This lack of involvement of the investigators in their own scientific research as first subjects comes from another line of tradition than the one I have been brought up and trained in. The justification of the opposing school, if you wish, is as follows. The patient has this disease, say cancer. The investigator does not have this disease. Therefore, if you are trying some new therapeutic procedure to try to cure the disease, you can't use yourself because you don't have the disease to cure. Now, let's go to page 99, continuing on to page 100. There was no creation by God. There was no God. There was no creation for anything. Matter itself and energy itself happened to combine in the right way to generate living assemblages of matter. These were my basic beliefs that I had to be challenged through the LSD session. In order to get rid of these limiting beliefs, I had to construct them into a completely rational whole with all of the negative emotion connected with them. As I was to understand later, this was a major burning of my karma. This episode was what the Sufis call going to hell in order to realize heaven. In my own estimation, the cosmic computer exposure was the most punishing experience I had ever had in my whole life. It was far more punishing than any nightmare that I had as a child. It was more punishing than any outside experience that I ever had at the hands of any human being. The pain, the terror, the paranoid feelings were of the maximum energy that my organism could possibly have sustained without burning me out. Now, let's go to page 110 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. I got into the hot seat, and Fritz says, "Okay, go back to your mother's death." I went back to that particular day, and I began to hear her dying, became frightened, and came back to the group. Fritz said, "Go back." I went back again and started going through the fear, the grief, and the guilt connected with the doctors, with my own part in it. I examined very carefully the whole tape having to do with her death. I cried. I became extremely fearful, got into panic. Then I cried with grief again. 3 times Fritz put me through it, and finally he said, "Okay, you haven't quite finished with that, but you have dealt with most of it." He let me off the hot seat. I spent a total of 2 weeks and 1 weekend in his workshops and learned very much about myself and about others and about his technique. I was impressed with the fact that he could tune in on where one was and then program one to move even further into this space that one was reluctant to go into. I found that as long as one was willing to allow him to program one and to go ahead into whatever it was, then Fritz was happy and one made progress. I was next exposed to Ida Rolf for a week. I received my first 3 hours of what's called Rolfing. Ida has worked out over a 40-year period a technique of working on deep muscles, the fascia, and the joints in such a way that structural integration is restored to one's body. One stands, walks, and does other things correctly the way one did as a child before trauma spoiled the line of the body. Ida frees up the body by stretching the fascia around the muscles. This leads to pain if one resists what she is doing or if the muscles themselves resist what she is doing. Now, let's go to page 112. Ida showed that she had an eye, a sensitive pattern recognition system for such evidences of trauma. She could look at somebody's body and feel it and tell immediately where these spots were and where these systems were. I suddenly began to realize that one did not have to go down into old age and become arthritic, that with Rolfing one could stay youthful. At that time, Fritz Perls, at 75, had 50 hours of Rolfing and showed it in its useful, bouncy step. Now, let's go to page 120. Continuing on to page 121 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. I began my first sorties into the various types of meditation. I tried the concentration, contemplation, some samyama type exercises from Patanjali. In these exercises, one concentrates upon a single object, either outside oneself or in one's mind, long enough and intently enough so that one finally fuses with the object and the seer fuses with the seen. I had also been reading Ramana Maharishi and his directions, in which he said to meditate on the question, "Who am I?" One answer is, I am not the seer, I am not the seen. Following the directions of Patanjali and the leads that I had laid out in the human biocomputer, I found further extension of the meditation exercise. The new, more expanded meditation went as follows. My brain is a huge biocomputer. I am the self-meta-programmer in this biocomputer. The brain is housed in a body. The mind is the software of the computer. These are the basic assumptions put forth in the human biocomputer. The key to the meditation was, who am I? Answer, I am not my body. I am not my brain. I am not my mind. I am not my opinion of me. Later, this was to be expanded into the more powerful 5-part meditation. I am not the biocomputer. I am not the programmer. I am not the programming. I am not the programmed. I am not the program. When the meditation had progressed to the latter point, I suddenly was able to break loose from the biocomputer, the programmer, the programming, the program, and the programmed, and sit aside from my mind, from my brain, from my body, and watch them operate and exist separately from me. Now, let's go to page 122, continuing on to page 123 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. Of mountains and molehills. Where there's a mountain, there must be a molehill under there somewhere. John Hammond Tree of Big Sur. Often one has the feeling of climbing a mountain for weeks, months, years. Later one finds it was only a molehill. One was crawling along the level ground. The steep slope was only imagined. One was creating the steep slope. The mountain was one's own imaginings, one's own work directives. We make work of our life to seem virtuous to ourselves, blaming others in circumstances of money and of culture, one's pride, vanity, and the precious opinion of what one is and of what one is becoming through mountain climbing creates the mountain slope. Look at me. Look at how far I've climbed up the mountain. I'm higher than you are. If you're higher than me, then I started lower than you and have really climbed further. My mountain is steepest. To see that all mountains are small molehills, that all human climbing is the delusion of a dream. Move into planetary orbit and looking down, see that all mountains are molehills. Move up and away from thyself. Look back down the past of thyself. There are no mountains, no molehills. There is only a dream of past encounters, illusions of past strivings, dream slopes of dreamt opposition. In storage, there is nothing but recordings of crawlings on the face of one small planet. So why not enjoy bliss and ecstasy while still a passenger in this body, on this spacecraft? Dictate thy own terms as a passenger. The transport company has a few rules, but it may be that we dream up the company and its rules also. There is only internal peace, internal bliss, and internal transforms of everything into joy in the one place one really lives. There is no mountains, no molehills, just a center core of me and transcendent bliss. Now, let's go to page 129. To believe in something. There's something to believe in, somehow, somewhere, within inner space or without, in outer space. The existence theorem. It exists, must be positive and whole. From where oneself is now, one believes that one can get belief in something by some way, route, program. If the way, route, program is seen to include changes in self, then one more belief is that one can change. One changes to believe in something. The search for the something cannot be done before belief that something exists. Something to believe in. The something to believe in is greater, somehow, than one's present self. It, something, can be future self, changed. It can be something or someone human outside oneself. It can be something out there among the planets, the stars. It can be something everywhere, inside and outside. Something far beyond man. Something you learn from and communicate with. Belief in something, concentrated, purposeful, determined, comes hard. Once believing in something beyond yourself, then it comes more easily. Now, let's go to page 134 of Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John C. Lilly. Limits of belief transcended. At first, one's limits are set by the belief, I am centered in my physical brain. That which one believes to be true is true or becomes true. At first, within the limits to be found experimentally. These limits themselves are beliefs to be transcended. I am not limited by the known physical senses, known physical signals sent, received by my brain. Transcended, these limits are left behind. I send, receive messages by means unknown, with unknown entities greater than me. Beyond transcendence is an infinite variety of unknowns. I move from my brain into other universes and spaces, other states of being. One Casey Waters Show. Producer Casey Waters. Graphic editing Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, caseywaters2@caseywaters.com.